painter, poet, draftsman, architect. First Western artist to have 2 published biographies when he was still alive. Michelangelo is known by all these titles, but perhaps the most important one that he himself treasured was the title of sculptor. Born on March 6, 1475, to Francesca di Neri del Miniato di Siena and Lodovico di Leonardo Buonarotti Simoni in a small Italian town called Caprese, Michelangelo di Lodovico Buonarotti Simoni grew up in a banking family. After he lost his mother at the age of 6, Michelangelo spent his time around stonecutters and painters. By the age of 13, it was evident to Michelangelo's father that his son was more interested in the arts rather than calculating numbers in the family business. So, he placed Michelangelo under the mentorship of the famous Florence fresco artist Domenico Ghirlandaio. With a year of learning as an apprentice in Ghirlandaio's studio, Michelangelo received his first big break. The Medici family was an Italian dynasty in Florence which lasted from 1434 to 1737. Although not born to nobility, their success in the banking sector, which was powered by a successful textile business, allowed them great political influence over the city. Once Cosimo de' Medici came to power in 1434, the Medicis became strong and well known for their patronage to the arts and humanities. This trend continued under the enthusiastic support of Lorenzo de' Medici. Aside from Michelangelo, the Medicis also supported other legendary figures of the Florentine Renaissance, including Botticelli, Donatello, Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, and Galileo. Lorenzo de' Medici first encountered Michelangelo when the teenager was studying at the San Marco Academy. Impressed by Michelangelo's skills, Lorenzo invited him to the Medici Palace to study from 1490 to 1492, under the instruction of the famous sculptor Bertoldo di Giovanni. Here, Michelangelo had access to the great works of Giotto, Donatello, and Masaccio. He also studied human anatomy by observing the cadavers at the Catholic Church of Santo Spirito. It was during this period of his studies that Michelangelo made his 2 sculptures, Madonna of the Stairs, 1491, a work showing the Greek influence on Michelangelo's training, and Battle of the Centaurs, 1492, which broke free from traditional techniques of creating sculpture. In both of these works, Michelangelo showed his own unique budding artistry. By 1497, Florence was experiencing a major political upset. A Dominican monk by the name of Girolamo Savonarola was calling for the destruction of all humanistic art and culture in his Bonfire of the Vanities. Born on September 21, 1452, to a banking family, Savonarola had hoped to have a career in medicine, but changed his mind and became a monk in 1475, joining the convent of Saint Domenico in Bologna. He later moved to Florence and became a lecturer at the San Marco convent. Savonarola called for the reformation of the church, which he believed had become influenced by more humanistic tendencies, a major sign of the Renaissance. His followers burned art, literature, mirrors, playing cards, cosmetics, and even musical instruments because they felt these vanity items caused people to sin. Although the Medici family had supported Savonarola in the beginning until the death of Lorenzo in 1492, the relationship grew strained as his views became more Republican and pro-French. In 1494, he helped Charles III of France to dispel the Medicis out of Florence and establish a Republican order in the city. Michelangelo, who still maintained friendly terms with the Medicis, left Florence and traveled first to Venice, then Bologna. During his stay in Bologna, he was hired to work on 3 marble statues for the shrine of Saint Dominic, the statue of Saint Proclus, 1495, a martyr of Bologna, the statue of Saint Petronius, 1494, a bishop of Bologna, and an angel, 1495, situated in the Basilica of San Domenico in Bologna. Lorenzo di Pier Francesco de' Medici supposedly sold one of Michelangelo's marble statues called Cupid, 1496, fashioned in Greek style to Cardinal Raphael Riario as an antique. When Riario discovered the statue was a fake, he demanded his money back, which he did get eventually. But more than that, Riario was impressed with Michelangelo's skills. He invited Michelangelo to Rome and contracted him to make another sculpture for him. Michelangelo obliged and chiseled out a nude marble figure of Bacchus, 1497, the god of wine. Unfortunately, perhaps because of the political atmosphere at the time, Riario rejected the idea of being associated with the figure of a nude and paganistic statue, and the statue was not placed in its appointed spot. Riario's rejection fumed Michelangelo, who refused to give him any credit for the commission. He told his biographer, Ascanio Condivi, to state in his biography that his banker Jacopo Galli commissioned the work. It was during his stay in Rome that Michelangelo received a commission from French ambassador Cardinal Jean Bilhares de la Gralois for another statue. The marble Pieta, 1498, was meant to grace the chapel of the King of France in St. Peter's Basilica. Pieta reflected Michelangelo's pure talent. It had realistic, almost human-like characteristics, and a type of divine beauty which set his work aside from his contemporaries. The Pieta is the only known work that bears Michelangelo's signature, which he added after he heard someone misidentify its creator. Michelangelo returned to Florence in 1498 after things simmered down to continue with his artistic endeavors. Commissions were slow in coming. Finally, in 1501, the Guild of Wool commissioned him to complete an unfinished project begun by sculptor Agostino de Duccio almost 40 years ago. The huge block of blue and gray marble from Carrara that Michelangelo had to work with had been titled the Giant because of its enormous size. Agostino was commissioned to carve out a statue based on the Old Testament, but he had only marked the marble and managed to chisel out a hole before leaving the work. When Michelangelo received the marble, he set about to complete the task. Michelangelo's David, 1504, was unique because it broke from the traditional representation of the biblical personage. David was typically represented as the victor after battle, holding the cut-off head of Goliath. But in Michelangelo's David, the hero is depicted as an energetic and robust youth before the battle. Here, David is in preparation to fight Goliath. The expression on his face is that of deep concentration. He is preparing to attack his opponent. His left hand holds onto the slingshot, which is being held over his shoulder. The weight of David's body is firmly planted on his right leg, with his left leg slightly bent in a contrapposto style. His body stands as if in motion to launch the slingshot that would eventually kill Goliath. Each and every muscle and vein carved in the 17-foot-tall nude statue shows Michelangelo's strong grasp of human anatomy. David was a spectacular work of art, and it continues to be considered one of Michelangelo's masterpieces and a quintessential example of high Renaissance art. Following the success of David, Michelangelo received commissions for several other projects. He worked on some paintings, but only one panel painting, Doni Tondo, 1506, which represents the Holy Family, is considered to have been completed entirely by the artist. Back again in Rome in 1506, Michelangelo was commissioned to work on a tomb for Pope Julius II. Although Michelangelo initially proposed a collection of 40 figures for the project, the main piece was an awe-striking marble statue of Moses, 1515, which became the central piece of the structure. Michelangelo's Moses is handsomely carved with its long, wavy, flowing beard and the superb anatomical proportions of the body to the realistic folds of the fabric, making it all seem authentic and real. The tomb was supposed to be finished within 4 years and situated at St. Peter's Basilica, but it took 40 years to complete, and it was eventually placed in San Pietro in Vincoli on the Esquiline in Rome. In the meantime, Michelangelo had created several other works, including the famous Sistine Chapel fresco depicting scenes from the Book of Genesis from the Old Testament. It was a back-breaking, laborious project that he amazingly completed in 4 years. Other works included The Last Judgment, 1541, created on the altar wall of the Sistine Chapel, which depicted the second coming of Christ and the judgment of God towards humanity. Design of the Laurentian Library, and the architectural work on St. Peter's Basilica. When Michelangelo wasn't busy tapping away his hammer and chisel, or painting gloriously with his mighty brushes, he could be found writing poetry. Although he never married, Michelangelo had at least 3 important relationships that sparked his poetic genius. His possible love affair and lifelong friendship with Tommaso dei Cavalieri began in 1532. Tommaso fumed his passion, which is evident in Michelangelo's poems from that period. Vittoria Colonna, the Marquise of Pescara, a poet herself, was another true friend to Michelangelo. Some of his most profound poetry was a dedication to her, along with his only surviving black chalk drawing, Pieta for Vittoria Colonna, done in 1546, the year before her death. Cecchino Bracchi, who was only 12 years old when he met Michelangelo at the court of Pope Paul III, inspired over 48 epitaphs following his death, a year after meeting Michelangelo. In his final years, Michelangelo created several pietas, including The Deposition, 1555, where he placed himself as Nicodemus lowering the body of Christ into the arms of his mother. Michelangelo supposedly smashed the left arm and the leg of Jesus in his Pieta, and the arm was later repaired by his student Tiberio Calcagni. The Rodani Pieta, 1564, was Michelangelo's last work. It was never completed because he ran out of stone to finish it before his death in 1564. Michelangelo's career spanned the period of the High Renaissance. He worked for a total of 9 different popes, from Julius II to Pius IV. Although he was considered temperamental by some, and often known to leave projects incomplete, which created strained relationships with some of his patrons, such as Riario, others, such as Pope Paul III, supported his work. Even though he felt he should be remembered as a great sculptor, his works ranging from the statue of David to the fresco at the Sistine Chapel and the painting of Donny Tondo makes him perhaps the greatest artistic legend of the High Renaissance period. His works not only inspired his fellow contemporaries and other legendary Renaissance masters, such as Raphael, but continued to, and still do, inspire generations of creative people around the world.